Hey everybody, this is Coach Chance, and welcome back to Sky Oaks Online Chess Club. This is our week 3 of the winter 2021 session. And today I'm going to be showing you two different checkmates that are very, very important to know how to do. Today we'll be going through the queen and king versus king checkmate, and two rooks and king versus king checkmate. So we're going to begin with the king and queen versus king checkmate. So this is a position that you will find yourself in a lot, and it's very important to know how to correctly do this checkmate. So the queen is obviously a very powerful piece. It can move pretty much anywhere you want it to. And what we're going to use it for in this situation is we're going to use it to cut off the king into a little box. So you'll see after my first move here, I'm going to move up to here because we can't get taken here. But we're also making this little box for the king here. And the goal is to reduce the box down to these two squares. Now that we've put our queen in this spot here. Because this is the direction that we're forcing the king towards. If my queen was here instead, then the box that we want to reduce this to will be over here. If my queen was here, we'd want to push the king back to here. If my queen, you guys get the idea. Push it to the corner that your queen is pointing towards here. So, with that in mind, we've created this box, right? And our goal is to try and reduce the box, make it smaller. So, the idea is if the king moves backwards any, then we move our queen forwards one square. If the king moves away, then we move our queen towards where the king is. So let me give you an example. Let's say that the king goes back to here. Since the king moved back a row, then we also want to move back a row exactly in the direction of the king. Let's say that the king moves sideways. Then we want to move our queen sideways in the exact direction that the king went. There are a couple of times when you won't be able to do this. Like, let's say that the king goes here, and we want to follow. The king goes here, and we want to follow. And now we have him on the back line. Right? We have him completely. He's only got these 6 squares. And remember, we want him to be down to these squares. So he has to keep moving. And he keeps moving. And we want to follow him. And he keeps moving. And we want to follow him. But now notice that the queen has these squares covered and the box is only down to 3 squares. The biggest part of having the king have these 2 squares for a box is that if you move the box down so that the king cannot move, it is stalemate and it's a draw, which is very bad because we know that we can win this position, but we need to not draw. So when the king finally moves over here, we can get our queen here, and we've covered these 6 boxes, and the king still has these 2 boxes left to move, right? These 2 squares left to move. And so now that we've created this little prison for the king, he's going to have to move back and forth. We do not want to move our queen from this position. The queen, once it has gotten the box down to 2 squares, stays exactly where it is. And then our objective is to get our king into this square, the one that's across from the square right here, the one that the king was in first. In this case, it's G6, but we'll go ahead and simulate that. We're just going to keep moving our king up, and remember this king is trapped. It just has those 2 squares, so we keep moving. And so now that we have our king all the way up here, no matter what happens, whether the king is in this spot or this spot, our next move is going to be our queen to the second box from the corner. And so this is checkmate. We want to put our queen in the second square from the corner here. Second square from the corner, and that is checkmate. So, setting up the position again, we will go back and try this again, except this time I'm going to ask you to pause every couple of minutes here and ask, what should you be doing? So, real quick, pause, and what is the first step that you need to do to start this checkmate? Right, we want to move our queen to make a box. So that's this move right here. Now, let's say that the king moves to here. What is your next move? Pause now. Right, since the king moved one over that way, we want to move our queen one over in the same direction. Now, what happens if the king moves there? Pause now. Right, we want to keep moving our queen in the exact same direction that the king did. And so these next couple of moves I'm going to make just on our own here. You don't have to pause. And now if the king moves here, what is your next move? Pause now. Right, we want to just keep moving in the exact same direction that the king did. The king moves over one, and the king moves over one. And now, what is the move now? Right, now that the king is fully restricted to 2 boxes, we want to start moving our king up to the square G6, or the square right across from the second. So now the king is trapped, and we start moving our king up just like last time. And once the king gets to G6, what is our last move? Pause now. Right, this is just checkmate if we move queen to G7. And that is the end of the king and queen checkmate. All right, now it's time to learn the second kind of checkmate for today. This is the king and 2 rooks versus king checkmate. And this is another very important one to know. You can do this with a queen and a rook. You can do this with 2 rooks. You can do this with a king and a queen. And we'll just be showing you the 2 rooks for this example. But know that it can be done with any pieces that have a straight line attack, not a diagonal attack, but any piece with a straight line attack. So rooks and queens, this works for any combination of them. So, the first step in doing the the 2 rooks and king checkmate is a lot the same as the king and queen checkmate. We want to move one of these rooks up to make a line that the king cannot cross. So in this case, I'll move this rook over, and we create this line that the king cannot cross. And so, now the king is forced to just move along this line. If he ever moves backwards, you just move the last rook that you moved back 1. So let's say that the king moves back, then you just keep moving the line back. But your opponents in real games probably will not do this. They'll probably try and go after one of your pieces. So in this case, he's going to go over there. Now that you have this line set up, you can use your other rook to move that line back without letting your king cross the original line, right? So if I move my rook over here, we've created a new line while not letting the king pass the other line. Now, of course, your opponent in a real game is going to go ahead and try and attack this rook, and will probably move here. Now, this is the part where you have to pay attention to your opponent, because if we move here now with our rook and try and move the line backwards, then the king is going to just take our other rook, right? So we want to move our rook across so that it doesn't block our other rook from moving up and moving the line back, but so that it's out of danger. Now, of course, the king is going to try and come back over and going to try and attack our rooks again, but we just keep moving the lines back, right? We just keep on extending that line until the king can't move anymore. So going back, again, we set up a line and we extend that line back. This is another scenario that you have to be careful. Now, what happens if we move our rook back to extend the line now? It's a little bit different, right? The king isn't here attacking our rook like it was in the last example, but this time it's attacking where our rook wants to be. But it's the same idea as before. We still want to move our rook across the board so that it's no longer in danger of being taken by the king once it moves back. So the king just keeps on moving towards our rooks, but unfortunately the other king cannot get to our rooks in time. Would it be okay if he could get to us in time? Yes, that's completely fine. We just slide our rooks or queen back to the other side of the board, and it's not an issue for us. We can keep moving our rooks back across to the other side of the board as much as we want to, as long as we keep our rooks safe and moving the lines backwards. So we'll set up quickly a position with the queen and the rook so that you can see how that looks instead. Go ahead and load that up. So the interesting thing with the rook and the queen, I'm going to go ahead and slide my queen right here. Note that the queen has diagonal movement. So let's say that we set up our rook right here. Just like normal, right? There's nothing going on here. But as soon as the king moves backwards one, we're actually going to do something different with a queen and rook than we did with just the two rooks. If the rook is on the second column in from the queen, like this, you can see that the rook is protected by the queen and will be no matter what. It also stops the king from getting anywhere in this column that it's in right now. So if the queen can never get attacked and the rook is always defended by the queen, you don't have to worry when the king is close. You can just keep on moving your pieces back and there's nothing he can do about it. Again, let's go back through this. Once we set up that second line, as long as the queen is on the back line, we can put the rook on the second to back line, and there's nothing the king can do about it. There's absolutely nothing that the king can do to take either of our pieces because the rook is always guarded by the queen, and the queen, by the rook having this entire column covered, can never be attacked by the king, and so you are free to just keep moving your pieces down the line. That's all I have for you today, and keep following the instructions that you were given by Coach Berg today. Have an awesome rest of your week.